Change Working, moving minds for change that lasts.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Change Working, a show for practitioners and coaches who help their clients create change. My name is Ruckus, and today we have something a little different for you. This is essentially a James solo episode. I haven't explicitly talked about this on the show, but James and I have a company called Client Shifts where we do practitioner training for change workers, coaches, therapists, hypnotists, NLP practitioners, anyone working in the world of helping clients create change. Part of the training is the ability to ask James questions at any time. A lot of these come out in the Facebook group, and oftentimes James will record a long form audio answer to the question. And this one was particularly good and I thought was worth sharing. It's very aligned with the podcast. A lot of students said they really enjoyed it, got a lot from it, were appreciative of the answer and the time he took to give the answer. So I thought I would go ahead and share it here on the podcast. It's about confidence and self-doubt in coaching. Now, James is using the term coaching because the question that came in was from a coach, but this is applicable to anyone doing any type of change work. I don't know anyone who does this type of work who hasn't at some point struggled with confidence, struggled with self-doubt. So I think this episode will be very useful for a lot of folks. So I wanted to go ahead and share it. So here is James talking about confidence and self-doubt in coaching.
So this is an audio on confidence and self-doubt in coaching. And I'm making it in response to a private message that I've been sent where somebody is revealing some personal kind of issues they've got with this. And it really resonated for me when I read this. I could really relate to so much of what I was reading here. I'm going to keep this anonymous because this was a private message. Generally, I encourage people, Ruckus and I both encourage people to ask questions in the Facebook group and in the open frames. But I appreciate that sometimes there's something that is personal, that it's not like, I don't really want to reveal this fully and completely publicly. That is a very human thing, a very understandable thing. Indeed, when I'm working with private clients one-on-one, I will often say to people, you can talk as much or as little about whatever's going on for you as you wish. There's no rule that says you have to tell me anything in particular. I recognize that we human beings, we're not always ready to announce to the world everything of our inner lives. That's a very understandable thing. So I want to bring this into the public space. I'm going to keep this anonymous, but I do believe that addressing this could be incredibly generative for a lot of people. Now, that said, I'm not going to give a complete answer on this. I'm just going to put some energy on it. This is something that is perhaps a deeper thing. And the person who's brought this in will be on their own change journey with relation to this. So I'm not going to go, right, this is a one and done, here's the answer. It's not really a question. It's a topic to put some energy on. That's what I'm going to do right now. And I would like for anybody who this resonates with to recognize that this is a very human thing. You know, if you're experiencing this kind of thing as well, this is a very human thing. A lot of people will experience this. And as you continue your journey through client shifts, keep this in mind. Make it a goal for yourself to transcend this because you can. You can transcend this. I know from personal experience that this can be transcended because this is something that was very true for me as well. So much of what I was reading here, I'm nodding my head going, I know that. I know what that's like. So let's get into this. I'm going to read it through once, and then I'm going to go back and kind of go through line by line and bring up what comes through for me in that moment. So confidence and self-doubt in coaching. The message says this: at times I find myself questioning whether I'm good enough or worrying about not being able to help my clients as much as I'd like to. Sometimes when a client brings up something, I get a sudden fear of, what if I don't know how to help with that? And this can momentarily block me. The client probably doesn't notice much of this, but it takes away some of the joy of coaching. I think there's a part of what if this might not work, and I don't want to bring that energy into the session. I do believe that the techniques and methods work, but I don't always believe they'll work when I'm the coach. There's a little upside down smiley face there. I do have patterns of fear of screwing things up, not being smart enough, making mistakes, and for someone being disappointed in me, which of course comes into play here. So a lot of really good stuff here, really human stuff, really juicy stuff. So let's go through this and take a look at it line by line. So first of all, at times I find myself questioning whether I'm good enough or worrying about whether I'll be able to help my clients as much as I would like to. So this absolutely resonates for me, this not being good enough thing. Now, when I got into doing change work initially, I sort of didn't really want to get into it necessarily. I wanted to find a place to apply all the stuff that I've been learning and using around NLP. I was a teacher of martial arts, and I was a manual therapist, these kind of things. And I was using a lot of NLP, conversational hypnosis in my work for a lot of years before I moved over to doing change work. And I was encouraged to do so by some NLP trainers I knew, and I did not feel like I could really help people every time. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know with certainty ahead of time, yes, I can help this person with this. I always had this insecurity going on, and I felt bad taking people's money and not really knowing in my heart, in my bones, in my body, that I could really help people, thinking, I don't know. I felt like I was rolling a dice and maybe I'd come up lucky. And that didn't feel good. I also felt for myself like in order to promote myself professionally, I had to hide that side. So that adds pressure, or it added pressure for me. So this is what came up for me when I was reading this very much. Now, in a sense, this is just about integrity, right? You want to be able to deliver, but there's always a problem, and I'll talk about this in a lot of other places, is we don't get to control complex systems, and we don't get to predict the future. So there's two levels of reality that we're dealing with in life. There's physical reality, or what you might call mechanical reality. And that's the world of things interacting with other things. Like if I play a game of pool, I can know if I get everything right and I hit the ball at the right angle, it will go in the pocket, right? I know that if I operate a coffee machine, if the coffee machine's working correctly, I put my money in and I hit the button and the cup drops down, the coffee comes up. Right, I can make pretty solid predictions about the future in the physical world, the world of the physical, the world of mechanical. But the world that we occupy in the main, although there are physical, mechanical things around us, is actually a psychosocial world. It's a world of mind and interactions between elements of mind, different people, different dynamics, this kind of thing. And these are complex systems. So the psychosocial world is a web of unknown and unknowable interdependencies. So you cannot operate in that world diagnostically like you can in the mechanical world. I've said this elsewhere. An automobile, a car, is a complicated system, okay? Complicated for most people. They don't know how everything fits together and works together. But all of the dependencies in that system are knowable, absolutely knowable, if you study them. And should you know them, you ought to be able to make diagnoses, make predictions, make corrections, and be reasonably accurate in predicting the outcome of it, right? Not always, but reasonably accurate. But everything is potentially knowable. Now, complex systems are not the same. That's a complicated system, not a complex system. These are different terms, complicated versus complex. In a complex system, the interdependencies are not only many of them unknown, but many of them are unknowable. We don't know fully how minds work. We don't know fully everything there is to know about all the ways we subtly influence each other, different aspects of self influence other aspects of self. You know, the world around us, we don't know this stuff. It is unknown and unknowable. Therefore, we are in a rather tricky position. Unlike a plumber who can look at a job, make a good assessment, and be reasonably accurate in terms of predicting outcomes, we don't get to do that. Okay? Now, we are also in a position of saying we can help you to do that. Okay? Because we can. We can up our ability to interact with these complex systems and nudge them towards good outcomes. So this is the way I look at this work. Is any work that I do with a client, all I can do is stack the odds of them creating the outcome that they want to create. Now, note how I say that. Them creating the outcome they want to create. One of the big keys for me in freeing myself from the sort of tyranny of like, I have to be able to do this for the client. I have to be able to fix the client's problem. I'm taking responsibility for things that are not in the realm of my power if I get caught in that trap. Okay? Because the primary responsibility for the change lies with the client or with the client's unconscious mind, their inner intelligence. And I would also say with the dynamics of the universe, right? It is not our right to control anything in the unfolding universe or in another person. It is only our right to choose what we choose. That's true of us as practitioners. We get to choose the choices we make, and those will nudge the system in certain ways. But the client also lives in the realm of choice. They get to choose. Many of the choices they're currently making are unconscious choices, or they're not making choices because they cannot see the choices that are available to them. But ultimately, it is within the realm of choice and responsibility for them to change what they are changing. Now, I don't mean this in some kind of like way where we go, well, it's down to you, and we start client blaming. You know, we have understanding, we have compassion. We see that people don't see the choices they have. We recognize that many of those choices are being made at an unconscious level, or that there are different parts within the system making different choices that may conflict with each other. So it's not clear, it's not smooth, it's not easy, but we're charged with working with it. So here's the thing. Where does the primary responsibility for the change lie? Now, so far as I'm concerned, in fact, let me introduce a frame here. This is from Byron Katie, and it's a version of Alfred Adler's separation of tasks, but I like the way that Byron Katie puts it. There are three kinds of business in the universe. There's my business, there's other people's business, and then there's God's business or the universe's business, depending on how secular or how religious you want to be. Right? Byron Katie is my business, other people's business, God's business. Three types of business. Now, the way Byron Katie puts it is when you are putting your energy and attention in other people's business or God's business, the universe's business, where you are not putting your energy and attention is on your own business. And this is something that Alfred Adler, the psychologist Alfred Adler, he used to hang out with Freud and Jung, but had a very different worldview. He called the separation of tasks. Okay, you want to take ownership for all that is your business and zero ownership or zero responsibility for what is another person's business. So in change work, the question is, whose business is what? Is it your business to change the client? Right? I would say no, it is not your business to change the client. It is your business to participate in a transformative process that your client is choosing to engage with, taking ownership for. And I think it's of real value to gently assist people in allowing the responsibilities to be where they ought to be inside the system. Now, how do we do this? Part of the reason that I like Ericksonian work, and there are other approaches that take this as well, it's like, well, who is the agent of change? What is the agent of change? Right? This is a really good question. What is the agent of change? Now, I bill myself sometimes as an agent of change, but I'm under no illusions. I'm not really the agent. I'm actually more of a change catalyst. Now, if you think about what a catalyst is, some people know this term, some people don't. It's a term from chemistry. It's something you add, right? If you get a chemical reaction between two things, you can accelerate or increase that reaction by adding something else. Now, that something else you add accelerates or increases a reaction. It does not cause the reaction. It is not the agent, it is a catalyst. So I'm not really a change agent. I say change agent sometimes in my marketing and my messaging because it's easily understood. Really, I'm a change catalyst. I would prefer to say that, but most people don't know what the term catalyst means. It's more confusing. So it's not a useful thing at the front end of the conversation. But that's definitely how I see myself. I see myself as a change catalyst. So I recognize 100% that change is possible. Not that it's inevitable, but it's possible, right? And I often say to clients, I say, whatever experience you've been having around this, and you may not have got as much movement as you like, I do want to let you know something that you're probably not fully aware of. And it is that you can change your experience around this. You can go beyond how this has been to somewhere much better, much more functional for you. And I know this is true because you're a human being, right? And I know that this is true more than you do. And I often say this to clients, and excuse my language here, I often work with military veterans and police officers and this kind of thing. So this is quite common language in that area. I'll say, no, I know you think you're probably some kind of special case of fucked up, right? And it's a sort of humorously put thing. And I always get a laugh and a yes at that kind of point. And I say everybody does. And it's so common that people think that when they've been caught in the grip of something for so long and haven't found their way beyond it yet. Right now, listen to all of this languaging here. I'm saying this stuff because I want to come from an organization of reality in myself, which holds absolute certainty in the fact that they can go beyond this. But listen, the power is placed within them and their humanness, right? Because everybody has a generative intelligence that when applied in an appropriate way can and will create change. Now, sometimes there are elements within the system that will fight that, parts of the person's kind of psyche, and we'll look at this, by the way, parts models, this kind of thing at some point, that might be resistant to that. But one thing is absolutely true for me. I'm sitting there with a client and they know how to walk and they know how to talk and they know how to think and they know how to deal with a myriad of complex situations in life. And they came into the world knowing nothing, absolutely nothing, right? Who did all that learning? Who put that repertoire of behaviors and responses in place? Where did it come from? Right? Now, one thing I know for sure is there is a profound generative intelligence that works largely outside of consciousness, that is able to look at the world and create solutions, create responses, and it creates all these different responses and solutions, right? I often call them the people's trance repertoires. Some people will talk about parts. Right? That stuff all got built by this deep generative intelligence. That client is possessed of this deep generative intelligence. That, for me, is what is going to create the change. That's what's going to create the change, not me, right? I don't want the client mistakenly thinking agency lies with me. I don't want them mistakenly thinking agency lies with their own conscious choices and struggles. I don't want them thinking agency lies with some special force called hypnosis, which is going to do something for them while they check out for a while. I want them to know that change is absolutely possible. I want them to connect deeply to this power, this generative intelligence, and experience this. This is why I love Ericksonian work, because it's really strong in that area. There's a guy called Jaeger, who's got an approach called Jaegerian therapy. Used to be called subliminal therapy. He talks about centrum. He calls this centrum. I'm not a fan of his kind of sci-fi terminology. Erickson calls it the unconscious mind. I sometimes call it the deep intelligence within you, generative intelligence, adaptive intelligence. There are different ways of thinking about this. But be aware that beyond consciousness, there is a profound intelligence that is able to learn, change, grow, adapt, create aspects of self that are able to do things to modify those aspects of self. This is absolutely fundamentally true. What happens when people get stuck is that generative intelligence goes offline and they keep trying to solve a problem using solutions they've already created but have become no longer well adapted. So we want to bring that generative intelligence online. I'll just say this here. Think about it like this. Every one of us comes into the world without any power to do much other than react at an instinctive level. Okay, we've got some reflexes. We've got a grasp reflex, a suckle reflex. We cry when our system perceives something being out of balance. We don't even know that it's called hunger yet or that it's called discomfort. We just cry when we need someone else out there to come and correct something for us. We don't even know what it is, right? This is how we come into the world, just this loose clod of instincts and reactions. Okay, now, one of the instincts that we have, I would call a generative instinct, a sense-making instinct. We want to make sense of the world. We want to build patterns of behavior. This intelligence, we come into the world there, and it's looking to make sense of the world around us, to build patterns of engagement that serve us. Because our journey from childhood is from zero power. We need to be looked after 100%. All we need to be able to do is get our caregivers to act. Okay? That's all we need to be able to do. If they don't act, if they don't do the right things, then we don't even survive. Now, our unconscious job is to put together a set of patterns, responses, understandings, ways of being in the world that help us show up and engage with the world in a way that puts us in our power to create generally good results, right? That puts us in a position to show up inside of this incredibly complex system, and the best we can do is dance with it. We cannot control it. You cannot control a system that is emergent from a whole bunch of unknown and unknowable interdependencies. It is not possible. The best we get is to dance with life. So when people are highly adapted, they're able to show up in the context of their lives, be how they need to be, respond the way they need to respond, feel how they need to feel, all of that kind of thing. Everybody becomes reasonably adapted to the world, to the life around them. Now, they come and see us when they go, I'm not quite being as I would want to be in this situation, or some inner conflict comes up. I feel like I want to run away from this situation, but another part of me wants to stay in this situation because I think that's the right thing to do for me and my future and maybe my family and whatever it will be. So this is when we are there to intervene. People are lost. All of that learning they did unconsciously. Now, one of the reasons why it's tougher sometimes for adults to change is because they've got more in place. Kids have got nothing. They're hungry. They build ways of being, ways of seeing, ways of responding, all of this kind of stuff because they need it. But when we're adults, we've got a bunch of stuff that basically gets us through. Okay, and we get stuck in that. We're invested in that. We're invested in all that we have built. And there's a wonderful phrase from the world of Taoism and Chinese internal alchemy, which is in order to profit, you must invest in loss. So the reason adults find it hard, their generative intelligence goes offline because it's relying on everything that it's built. And it's betting on everything that it's built. Every part, every interaction, every repertoire, it's betting on that. It's a risk, in a sense, to let go of that. Now, when people let go of what they've built and they truly let go of it, their generative intelligence will sweep in, and it will, and it can, and it always has. It will create something new. But there's a bet to be made there on the part of the client to let go of the old in order to allow the new. Some people are more willing to do it. Some people are more open to doing it. And others are not so much so. Now, it's not your responsibility to open a client's mind, right? It is not. It might be part of your job to do what you can strategically to encourage that. But in the end, it's not down to you whether someone else's mind opens or closes. It is not down to you whether their generative faculty comes online. It's just about learning to make the invitations to dance, maybe act a bit strategically, stack the odds in the favor of the client getting the result that they want, doing all of this, and of course doing it from a very grounded space. We don't want to be in fear and all of that. And I say that not to make a judgment. It took me a long time to unhook myself from my fears and insecurities in doing client work and many other things in life. Okay? And I'm not saying you can't do good work unless you fully unhooked your fears, right? You can. You probably are, and you probably will if you're out there, you're doing the work and you've got your own stuff going on. That's absolutely fine. But in the end, what I'm saying right here, to summarize what I'm saying, I've only got one line of this so far. Look, the default state is change. People have a generative faculty, a generative intelligence, an adaptive intelligence, whose job is to build adaptive patterns. It can get lazy when the work's done. We want to bring it back online. There's also the motivational stuff that can come into that. But what we don't want to do is fall for the idea that it is our responsibility to do what it is the responsibility of the client's adaptive intelligence to do. That's a mistake. It's an erroneous acceptance of responsibility. Okay? So I want to just reinstate this idea. Imagine there's you, there's the client, and there's the client's generative intelligence. And when I say there's the client, I mean the client, the parts of the client that are showing up going, I want to change something. It is not the parts that say, I want to change something who are responsible for doing it. It's the client's adaptive intelligence, right? We want to be clear on the roles here. It's our job to facilitate interaction, discovery, learning, this kind of thing. And we've got tools and we've got techniques. And it's our job to dance and bring what we know into the creative flow. I often use this term as a creative flow. It's my job to bring things into the creative flow and to stimulate creativity and keep that person's adaptive intelligence paying attention, learning, discovering, reweaving, reconditioning, doing all sorts of things. This is always a dance, never a process of reprogramming, never a process of control. Okay, this is why we want to participate in the unfolding. We want to create with what comes up, but we always want to know what direction we're taking the system in so we can go, yeah, more of that and less of that. At some point, I'm going to talk about tote loops, test, operate, test, exit. This is a way we steer towards an outcome, and we make corrections as we go by paying attention to what's unfolding in the moment. So all of this is what we want to do. And what I would say is if you get any kind of voice coming up that is falling for the illusion that it's supposed to be our job to control things, right? See that, witness that. Okay, go, I see you, right? You can even witness yourself witnessing it if you want. You want to start recognizing the voices, the imagery, the whatever that's trying to pull you into a version of reality that's not true and is debilitating for you. Okay, you don't have to struggle against it. You don't have to get rid of those thoughts. Just see them when they come up. Go, I recognize you. I see where you're trying to take me. And, I reject your reality and I substitute my own. And my own reality here is what I believe is a true reality. And I would encourage people to take it on board. Of course, client shifts will be saturated with my biases. But that truer reality is we're here to dance and engage creatively. And it will come out the way that it comes out. There is no rule in the universe that says you have to get perfect results for your client every time, right? In fact, there's no rule in the universe that says you have to get any specific results at all. That is not your responsibility, right? It is the responsibility of anything of the client's creative, adaptive, unconscious mind. If your client doesn't believe they have a creative, adaptive, unconscious mind, then maybe you don't want to work with that client unless they're open to discovering that, connecting with that, whatever. And it's one of the reasons, if you look at Erickson's work, he would do so much stuff on early learning sets, right? And we'll look at that somewhere else because he was building this understanding in a client that they had a powerful, creative, unconscious mind that was able to do incredible things for them. Oftentimes while they just rode along, they're along for the ride. They're not really driving it. Their creative unconscious mind is. Okay, another thing that Erickson's doing a lot of the time is getting people to let go of conscious control so they can have that adaptive unconscious mind come in. They become a participant rather than a controller. We all want to be participants here, not controllers. Right? The client's conscious mind, if you like, or the various parts of the client that want change, they are participants in the change process. We, our expertise, our understanding, our knowledge, our creative choices, we are merely participants. And with all creative choices we make, we don't know the result of them until we make them. We don't know ahead of time what the effect of any creative choice or any maneuver in the moment will be. We only know it's an option. So we want to deploy that option, be curious about what unfolds from it, and figure out where we go next from there. So this is the whole ethos of the client shifts approach. So I'm going to carry on reading this through, see what else we get from this. So it goes on here. Sometimes when a client brings up something, I get a sudden fear, what if I don't know how to help with that? And this can momentarily block me. So what I would encourage here is for you to begin to connect with an it's okay not to know rendering of reality. Okay? I never know how to help with a client. I don't know. I've got ideas. I've got hunches. I've got senses of things that might be possibilities. I'm not there just going, well, I don't know, and having no choices. I have many choices. That's all we ever have. I don't ever know how to help a client. I just know that I have choices that I can deploy into the creative flow. And I have an ability to deploy those choices and be aware of what comes up as a result. I do not and cannot know ahead of time. And that needing to know ahead of time, it's what I call the tyranny of the correct decision, right? I see a lot of people, not change work practitioners necessarily, but people in life who live under the tyranny of the correct decision. I need to know ahead of time what the correct decision will be. But you can never know ahead of time in a complex system what a correct decision is. You can only know afterwards. And even then, it's not even correct. It's only correct or incorrect if you judge it as such. The truth of the matter is, in life, all we can ever do is take a step, and wherever we end up as a result of the step we take is the place we take the next step from. Life is just the correction of one mistake into the next, as one great sage said. I love that expression. Life is just the correction of one mistake into the next. Or, equally true, is life is the correction of one perfect moment into the next. Because whether something is a mistake or a perfect moment is all a matter of judgment. The fact is if you're in the flow and you keep moving and you keep a sense of the generative direction that you want to go in, what's good, what's better, what's freer, what's looser, what's more resourced, what's nicer. If you have a sense of that, you can always step and then step again, right? Whether each one you see as a mistake or a perfect moment is down to you. That is the nature of the dance. So know this, you never get to know ahead of time. In fact, I'm going to reference something here that relates directly to client shifts. So Felix was involved in a demo in the visual squash section. And when I invited people up and said, is there something you'd like to work on, something you'd like to make a change around? Felix came up and he said that he would like to make a change around social anxiety. Now, I have particular biases and proclivities as to how I would work with social anxiety. And I felt the pull, right? I want to do this particular thing here. But I was there to demo a visual squash. And I even say at the beginning of the demo, I've got some instincts as to where I go, but we're going to do a visual squash right here. And I'd like you to be open to the very real possibility that this will not be any less, effective than the way I might normally work, and may even be more effective. I didn't quite put it that way, but that's the sentiment of what I wanted to get across. And then we did the visual squash. Now, Ruckus followed up with Felix afterwards, and then Felix very generously made an additional post for Facebook saying, here's what I experienced in a lot of detail in terms of shifts and change. There are a lot of shifts and change now. I could go down that list and go, didn't predict that, 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 didn't predict any of it. None of the things Felix got are things that I would have predicted. And here's the thing, I didn't even make the choices that I would have normally made. Right? Now, I'm not saying here, oh, look, I did brilliant work, even though I wasn't working the way I normally do. It's not about me. It's about the creative flow that Felix and I participated in. It's about the presence of his generative, creative, unconscious mind. It's about his willingness to show up and engage fully in the process. Engage in a genuinely transformative process, to play it full out, as Ted James would say. Because it is absolutely true, you cannot change things without there being change. The only way you can change things without there being change is if you change them and then you erase the change you made, or go back or undo it somehow through some additional activity. Otherwise, when you change something that has run habitually, there will be change. People go, but what if they go back to the old habit, right? If you've done it well enough, you want to make it so the person can't go back. So there's the Churchill principle that I sometimes talk about. Winston Churchill allegedly said, it's amazing how often in life people stumble across the truth, pick themselves up, dust themselves down, and wander away as if nothing had ever happened. So I always want to make sure that when we get change happening, I shine enough attention on it that the person can't really forget that. I don't mean consciously, I mean unconsciously, right? They now know, they now see unconsciously a choice that they didn't see before. So things start to change. This isn't a reprogrammed change, it's an unconscious learning change, which is the same way all change is done in a human system. It's always about unconscious learning. It's never about reprogramming. It's never about some kind of magic. It's always learning. It's always learning and relearning. That's all we're ever doing. When we're working hypnotically, for example, or psychoactively, we want that learning to be happening at a deep level, not just a separate intellectual mind doing some musing and some pondering. That's really all that we're doing. So what I'm saying here is, Felix came up in that session. My instincts were to do something different, but I stuck with the demo, right? And it doesn't matter. Maybe the results that we got, and I'm completely open to this because I've got no way of calibrating otherwise, the results that we got with that visual squash demo were better than the results that would have come about if I'd have gone with my instincts. Maybe. It's unknown. It doesn't matter really, because change work is always an ongoing process. People can stay in the change game as long as they wish. They can step out when they don't. Most of the work that I do session by session. This isn't how I do things on my website. But when I'm working with Rock Recovery, it's session by session. I say, if you're getting something useful from this, you're welcome to come in. And people come back so long as they're getting something useful. If they're not getting something useful, they don't come in. Okay, it's just that simple. One of my colleagues actually at Rock to Recovery says the only condition for you to get another session is that you're changing. Right, so if you do a session and we're not getting change happening, then there's no point doing further sessions. So it's kind of interesting. It's flipped round. It's like if you want another session, you've got to be changing, right? So look out for changes and let me know what the changes are. So there's a sort of fait accompli there in terms of the work. And there's no rule in the universe that says anybody has to work with you further. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's not an indictment upon you if somebody works with you or doesn't. Right? You might go, well, surely it is. Or maybe generally in aggregate, if everyone is well, I'm not getting good results, then you want to look at what you're doing, obviously. Look at how you're participating. It's never about your control. Okay? But generally speaking, people have every right to get no change. And just because a part of them said, I want to change this, doesn't mean that all of them is on board for it, or there isn't another level in which they don't want to change it. There's always resistance in the system when you've got change work, right? That's not your fault. It's not your fault if there's resistance in the system, right? You can make it your responsibility to investigate that resistance, to strategically influence that towards something different. You can make that your responsibility, but the outcome of that is not your responsibility, okay? This is like, who is it who wrote The War of Art? Stephen Pressfield wrote The War of Art. He makes it clear that as an artist, all that you can own and take responsibility for is your work. You cannot take responsibility for the results of your work. You can only ever take responsibility for your work. And that in order to, now if you take too much responsibility for the results of your work, that will get in the way of you doing your work, right? So it is not your responsibility what comes out of the session. It's only your responsibility to show up and engage creatively, bring your knowledge, bring what you've got, bring an open mind, bring your curiosity, be willing to experiment and explore. It is so common for me to do. I'll tell you what, let's do a thing right now. And it's going to seem weird to you, but I'm going to invite you to keep an open mind around it and be curious about what you experience. And now I say something like that because I'm inviting the person to have an experimental, exploratory mindset, not to have a passive mindset while I do a thing to them. I want them to show up and engage and not be overly attached with excess importance to any particular outcome. I'm really seeding the idea that there's going to be change and difference, but I'm also giving complete permission in the same statement for there not to be any change or difference. Okay? Now, I just want to say right now, part of this I'm doing to unhook my own attachments and excess importances, but I'm also doing it to unhook the client's attachments and excess importances. attachments and excess importances on both sides of the equation will hinder the work, right? They won't necessarily destroy the work, but they will hinder the work on both sides of the equation. So it's really important, in my view, like, isn't that ironic that I'm saying it's really important to unhook excess importances? Okay. And again, there's a deeper level there. These things often end up self-referential because we are complex systems. But I'm going to just offer that as a rule of thumb. Look for where you can unhook outcome attachment, unhook excess importance, and replace it instead with a curiosity about what's possible, what's unfolding, right? And a true, deep, present engagement with the work from that place of curiosity. The more you can get that work into that place, the better the results are going to get. That's not always easy when people are dealing with fearful stuff and it's coming up, it's trying to get a grip on them. We want to know how to release them from that fear so they can return once again to a place of interest and curiosity. Okay, so to carry on with this, so the what if I can't help them with that sometimes blocks. I understand that. Remember, that's just the voice that's trying to talk you into a crazy version of reality that we all fall for, but is not true at all. You can't control things. You do not get to know ahead of time what the effect of any move or any maneuver you make will be. You only get to choose the maneuver and be curious about what unfolds from it. That's all we have available to us. So the client probably doesn't notice this much, but it takes some of the joy out of coaching. Now, I understand that completely. And I would say the more you can remove the things that take the joy out, right? Listen for those, who is it? Somebody called them the blurts. We can be in flow with something and then this little voice shows up or an image or a feeling that just is like, yeah, but what? Right? Listen, watch out for your own blurts. Know the stuff that doesn't belong in the reality tunnel of you coaching at your best. Okay, when you're coaching at your best, that's like what? So any thoughts that don't belong there, let them be outside of that. Say, you can belong to someone else, some other part of me that's not here right now. Okay, now they might come up, but the less seriously you take them, and you're probably already pretty good at doing this, letting them go, letting yourself get back into the flow, into the joy of things. Remember this, there is no rule in the universe that says anything particular has to happen inside of a coaching session or afterwards. We are all just these human beings. We don't even understand what we are, participating in a greater unfolding. You, the client, everybody else, the world is unfolding. Things are moving. We get to dance the dance and just discover what comes out of that. Right? We get to control nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay? And that's okay. And all is well. And all manner of things will be well. So, so anything that gets in the way of the joy of things, there's deeper level stuff on this as well. Like, there's a deeper path of what you might call unhooking the ego or whatever, or starting to recognize that, all the I's, the autobiographical I's, the stories of me aren't true. So the me that might be damaged by the client's disapproval or not getting a good result or any kind of judgment that we or somebody else might pass, the I that could be damaged by that is illusory. It doesn't really exist, right? And that's I'm touching on something very deep there. I should say it one more time, just to seed the idea. But the I that is concerned about being harmed or damaged by the judgment of the client, the judgment of ourselves, anything particular, that I does not really exist, right? It's a narrow ego state that takes us over and it doesn't even begin to touch who we are. Whatever you think you are, you're wrong, okay? Because you're not made of those ideas. Whatever judgments you may pass upon yourself, you're wrong, because you're not made of the ideas that those judgments are constructed of, right? What gets lost is the infinite number of connections and possibilities and expressions of who you are that go beyond that you're not seeing in that moment, right? That's the nature of trance. All trance is falling for a moment of what I see is all there is and how I see it is how it is. Or sometimes what I feel is all there is and how I feel it is how it is. That's the nature of a trance, right? And everything else gets excluded. So we're getting pulled into a trance there, and we want to be able to shift ourselves out of a trance if we get into that. And the trance that I want to be in is a trance of creative flow and possibility, the trance of infinite possibilities, the trance of dancing, the trance of exploration. And that dance can be a joyful one much of the time. Sometimes it can be bittersweet because a client might be in a very dark place. And we want to still stay in the energy of flow and dancing there, and an energy of all is well and all manner of things will be well. We don't necessarily want to say it explicitly, but we want to be in the energy of it. We might talk about energy and vibe and quality later on in the program at some point. So let's carry on with this. I think there is also part of what if this might not work, and I don't want to bring this energy into the session. That's really good observation. Okay, so practice letting that energy go. Practice living into the reality of there is no this might not work, right? Live into the reality of this flow, this dance that I talk about. This is my bias. I sometimes do this as a piece of trance work with people because so often in life, many of people's problems come about from trying to control the uncontrollable. That's what worry is. Worry is an attempt of what if this, what if that? You can't do anything about any of those things. I saw a little clip on Instagram the other day of somebody with a mop and bucket and the tide is coming in. It's actually a real video. They've shot it for fun. The tide's coming in and they've got a mop and they're trying to mop up the ocean as the tide comes in. So much worrying in life is like that. It's like somebody trying to mop up with a mop and bucket, trying to mop up the ocean as the tide comes in. Tide's coming in. It's coming in, right? There are better choices than trying to mop it up and trying to control the tide coming in. We don't get to control when the tide comes in, when the tide goes out. We do get to choose how we respond to that. So a lot of the work that I do with people is getting them to stop trying to control the uncontrollable, because that always leads to fear, worry, anxiety, neurosis, these kinds of things. And to start allowing and dancing, right? Move from control to choice. So I'm doing this a lot. So sometimes I'll do a trance piece with somebody where I really get them to experience being a part of the flow of life. They are inside of it, moving with it, experiencing the energies of life, the dynamics of life, moving with them, moving through them, carrying them along. So they are a part of the flow of life, not apart from the flow of life, trying to control it and all of this. This is a trance work piece I'll do when people are doing a lot of worrying, anxiety, this kind of thing. And it often gets a good response. I get them out of those narrow ego states and into a broader, fluid kind of a trance. So one of the good things about working that way is it's a participatory trance. When I'm doing that trance with somebody, I'm not apart from it, controlling it from the outside. I'm a part of it too. I'm in flow. I'm creating a shared trance that we're both in, where we are in and of the world, flowing with it, being with it, feeling life moving through, doing what it does, experiencing its dynamic processes, being a part of them, being carried by life and resting into it fluidly, right? So I do this kind of trance work with people, and I do it for myself as well. Why? Because I want to live in the reality that I want to help the client be in. If I'm outside of that, trying to micromanage them into being in a freer kind of way of being in the world, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And by the way, that I'm not condemning anyone that does. I used to do it. I'd be trying to micromanage people into more freedom. How does that work? It's crazy. If I can't let go and allow, how can the client let go and allow? Right? And again, mentioning my Ericksonian biases, I often say the basis of Ericksonian therapy is moving from controlling to allowing, right? And when we move from controlling to allowing, that's when this creative unconscious mind can come back on board, get curious, because there's less threat in the system. Threat and danger and fear, they're the enemy of curiosity. And on the flip side, curiosity is a kind of antidote to them. So working those two dynamics can be really interesting. So right now, I guess I'm saying there's so much more freedom in this than you realize. So much less need to control anything. Everything that you learn, anything that you remember, it just informs you. They're just creative choices that you can bring to the moment. You may or may not bring to the moment. And all of that is fine, right? You may forget things. Sometimes I'll do a client session. I'll use something I haven't used for years. Oftentimes I'll use something, a metaphor, something that happened earlier in the week. It's all part of the ongoing flow of life. My job is to bring different things into the flow for the client and nudge things in a generative direction. That's all that I'm doing, and I find it a much freer way to work. So I get that, what you're saying here about not wanting to bring this energy into the session. I don't want to bring a controlling, micromanaging, needy, attached, excess importance energy into sessions. I want to free myself from that because it's part of my job to help the client free themselves from that. So what is it that the old NLP expression is, go there first? Some people would say, be the change you want to see in the world. Maybe be the change you want to see in the client. Okay. And this is going to come back to another one of the points made was around applying change work to myself, but I'm going to do that in a different session. Okay. So let's see what's going on here a little bit further. I do believe that the techniques and methods work, but I don't always believe they work when I'm the coach. I'm going to say the techniques and the methods don't work. Okay, I'm going to say they don't work. They are just options, possibilities, choices, maneuvers that the client's creative unconscious mind will make the use of that it makes. Right? It's not that they work or they don't work. There's nothing inherently special in the majority of options or choices. I had a mentor of mine who said to me, all therapy works some of the time with some people. No therapy works all of the time with all people, right? That's absolutely true. I was also reading a book recently, The Balanced Brain by Camilla Nord, and she was saying that one person's miracle cure is another person's snake oil and vice versa. And this is true across the board. So what's the difference that makes the difference? The difference that makes the difference is how the client's creative unconscious mind utilizes what you offer. So it's never about the tools and the techniques working, I would say. Now, it's a story I've told before. I shall tell it once again now. My mother used to be a real car boot sale hound. So, and flea markets and car boot sales and stuff like this. And she would buy all sorts of things, any kind of bargains that she would see. And she came home once with a bunch of car care products for cleaning your upholstery and polishing your paintwork. And they all had names like, I'll clean your upholstery for you. I'll polish your paintwork for you, and this kind of thing. And I had this can of, I think it was I'll wax and polish for you, it was called. And it was funny to me at the time. I was about 13, 14. I put it on the bonnet of the car, on the hood of the car. And I said, go on then, wax and polish the paintwork. And of course the can just sat there, right? Because the fact of the matter is that kind of stuff doesn't really do anything until it's made use of. Somebody has to take it, use it, apply it, And the fact is how they apply it will make a difference. How much diligence they bring to getting the result they want will make a difference. So the kind of stuff never really does anything. It doesn't really work in and of itself. It's how you work it that makes the difference. So I would say that none of the tools, none of the techniques, none of the processes actually work. It's about how they are worked. Now, the second thing here is, it says, I don't always believe they work when I'm the coach, right? So the question is, whose job is it to work the tools, let's say, the tools, the techniques, the choices, whatever? Is it your job as a coach to work them? Is it your responsibility as a coach to work them? Is it the client's conscious mind responsibility to work them? Is it the client's unconscious mind responsibility to work them, right? Or something else, the universe, God, whatever, right? Whose responsibility is it? The fact of the matter is it's, I would say, likely a collective responsibility. So I always say all creation is co-creation. It's always co-creation. So yeah, we want to be, like the more skill, elegance, art we can bring to working the tools, great. The more skill, elegance, and art we can bring in coaching the client to make use of the tools, great. All of these things come into the mix. The client's responsibility to show up and engage, this is huge as well. I don't castigate clients into doing this. I don't use some kind of harsh, well, you have to do this. I'm not authoritarian in that respect. There's always an invitation for people to engage creatively in the work that I do. This is part of how I coach people in how to engage. Okay, so you've got a tool, you're going to use the tool, you want to coach people in how to engage with the tool in ways that are most likely to be conducive to good outcomes. These are all good skills to have. On the flip side of that, right? I remember my friend Jürgen saying to me many years ago, this work can be very forgiving. And I was like, what? What do you mean by that? And what he meant is you can do things in all sorts of ways and find them to be useful. You can do things in inelegant ways and still get good results. Now, you want to be congruent with that. Like if I'm going to do something clunky, I might say to the client, I'm going to do my best with this. It might be a little bit clunky, right? Because I'm new to it or something like that. Or sometimes I do something with a client and I might say, and that wasn't entirely the best way of saying that or something like that. I'll own my clunkiness, right? Sometimes if I need to, right? If I feel that it's there. There's a little piece of advice I used to give people. There's an incredible power in being willing to have inelegant conversations. Now, this was a piece of business advice I used to give people when they were out looking to create with other people in the business realm. People would go, I've got to get my pitch absolutely perfect. But actually, if you show up as a human being and you own your imperfections and you're willing to have an inelegant conversation, but be adaptive and flexible and adjust, it doesn't matter if you don't get it right first time. You can adapt. I'll tell you what I really dislike. I really dislike that old saying, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. I mean, talk about putting pressure on people, right? The idea implicit in that is if you don't get that first impression right, you're going to lose out along the long curve. That's absolutely nonsense. Okay? We are adaptive. We are alive. We get to course correct all the time. If we put our foot in it, we can always make good, right? Things change across time. Okay? So that the tyranny of having to get it right all the time, having to be smooth, having to be whatever, take that away. Take that off the table. Give yourself 100% permission to be a human being, and being a human being means doing things imperfectly. It means screwing up, messing up, doing things in a cack-handed way, but being free to just be honest with that and create forward nonetheless. Okay? So just tons of freedom, I would say, give yourself. Do everything in an experimental, exploratory frame, and you will do good. So to recap here, I do believe the techniques and methods work, but I don't believe they work when I'm the coach, right? They don't work. They're just things that go into a creative flow. We're all participating in the creation. We're all human beings. We're all imperfect. That includes us, coaches and change work people. And, there can be a tendency for us to encourage ourselves. I was reading in a book recently, don't believe your own marketing. It said, don't believe your own hype. The problem is when we put ourselves up on a pedestal, or we think we should be on a pedestal, or we think we need to in order to get business, we end up in a very vulnerable position, and that's when the imposter syndrome comes in. Be a human being. It's okay to be a human being. It's okay. It's okay to be somebody who's got a thing or two. I said this for years. People come in, I say, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a counselor, and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. My title here is coach. What that really means is I'm a guy that knows a thing or two about how minds work, and maybe I've got something that can help you out, right? I used to say this. Now, my energy is grounded. I'm not worried. I'm not fearful. So it's about the energy. People go, well, that's not a very confident thing to say. Confidence or not confidence comes from the energy, not what you say, right? It's the energy. It's the how you say it, not what you say. So I'd say, maybe I got a thing or two that can help you out, right? Or I say to somebody, they come and I go, people come and see me when things have got on top of them. My job is to help you get back on top of what you need to be on top of, right? I say something like that. My job is to help you get back on top of what you need to get on top of. So that's kind of like some of the frames around coaching. If somebody comes in and says, James, can you stop me smoking? They want to give me responsibility. I might say, one of the first things I'll generally say is, so you want to stop smoking? I don't answer the question because I want to be in the driving seat. I don't want to be reacting to their questions. But the truth is, I'll say, if you really want to stop smoking, you can, right? If you really want to stop smoking, you can. And I've probably got some things that can help make that easier for you. So I'm going to say that. If you want to stop smoking, you can. I've probably got some things that will make that easier for you, particularly if you're willing to be open-minded, right? So I'll do that. I don't want to take on an excess responsibility for myself. I want to own my participation 100%, but not take the excess responsibility and offer that back to them. So it's not about the techniques working, it's about a co-creative flow. It's always about that. And the client and their unconscious mind, their generative intelligence is always a part of, or it's the major part of who's responsible for getting the change. Okay. So it says, I do have patterns of fear, screwing things up, not being enough, making mistakes, and someone being disappointed in me, which comes into play here. So like, that's a huge piece. And I think kudos to you, to the person writing this, and anybody else who's willing to admit this to themselves. The tyranny of fear and insecurity is at its worst when we're unwilling to turn around and look at it square on and say, I see you. I see you and it's okay, right? And I love this. I do have patterns for fear of screwing things up. It's good to know I'm not afraid. It's a pattern of fear of screwing things up. There's a tendency there, or I have had a tendency to have this fear. There's a part of me that has this fear, right? And there's a part of me that knows it's just fears, it's just insecurities. And that's a good start point. I'm not saying that's the be all and end all of self-change work in this area, but it's a good start point. I see you and I know that you are not me, right? And I can be skeptical about the alleged truths that you might bring to me. Like, but what if it screws up? Well, okay, then, what does that even mean, screw up? What does it even mean? What does mean? I love that. What does it mean when people go, what if this? What does that even mean? Because when you get deeper into it, well, screw up, it doesn't come out the way it should. What does that even mean? What does any of this even mean? What would you really love to have happen here? So, there's a line just came up in my mind. I went to an event called the Grow Stronger Experience years ago by a personal trainer called Elliot Hulse, who later went temporarily crazy, it seemed, and he seems to be back with his feet on the ground again. But he had this kind of affirmation, which is, I go beyond your fears and limitations. I create my life. Right? Now, I kind of like that in some ways, because all these fears, these doubts, they're not really ours. We weren't born with them. These fears and doubts, there's something we picked up probably from someone else who had similar fears and doubts and projected them on us when we were growing up. They're not even our fears and doubts. So really we go, that's some annoying tape loop or something, or movie loop that just got, I picked up somewhere along the way. Do I really want to take it that seriously? It's like my daughter when she was younger, she used to watch Scooby-Doo and get terrified. Why? Because she thought that the villains in Scooby-Doo, what she was seeing on the screen, was telling her something about reality. Now she can watch Scooby-Doo and know it's just a cartoon. It's nothing to take too seriously. So the more we can get ourselves into that position where we go, those fears, those limitations, they're like the Scooby-Doo movie villains, right? They don't really say anything about reality. I know it seems that they do. It seems they're saying something important about reality, but they're not. And I know that the person who's written this, I do have patterns of fear of screwing things up, is already starting to have some skepticism about those thoughts. That's not me. That's not who I am. It maybe even isn't a good representation for anything useful in the world, right? So the more, every time you see that, the more space you put between you and that. There's deeper stuff you can do, there's shadow work processes you can do on that kind of stuff, which are very powerful, I like. We might cover those at some point. We will, in fact, I don't doubt. But, making mistakes, there's someone being disappointed in me, right? Like if I get something like that, I don't want to disappoint people. See, I've talked about this elsewhere. It's a really good example. Disappointment there is what I call a key operational concept. It will have a heavy charge on it. I don't want to disappoint people. Liberation in that area comes from going through processes of like, I have every right to disappoint whoever I want. And who really has a right to have that kind of level of expectancy of another person, right? We all disappoint people. It's inevitable, right? And disappointment is a function of another person's expectations, not a function of my abilities. In fact, who on earth says we ought to live our lives living up to everyone else's expectations? If we do succeed, imagine you did succeed in living your life, living up to everybody else's expectations so you didn't disappoint them. Imagine you took on that gargantuan task and you actually won. You did it. Nobody was ever disappointed in you. What a wonderful life. And you'd still be somebody who wasted their life living up to everyone else's expectations rather than finding what's in your heart, finding your own ground, your own truth, who you are that goes beyond that, who you are that knows, I'm free. I don't owe these random people anything, certainly nothing that's superhuman, right? And if people have expectancies of you to be superhuman, i.e. to be able to control complex systems, to predict the future, all of that, really, they really ought to look at those expectations. I mean, they don't have to, but they're not your expectations, right? So what are your expectations? Start with those first, okay? Because expectations, right, they're different from expectancies. I've got a distinction here, expectations versus expectancies. Expectancies are about unconscious senses of what will happen. Expectations are about demands about what should happen, right? Expectations are always toxic, always, within human dynamics, interpersonal and intrapersonal. So there's a thing there when I do what I sometimes call belief forensics. I would look at disappointment. What are the allied concepts inside of that? How well do they fit with reality? What kind of trances do they create for us? So I would do some stuff to bust that one out. I have every right to disappoint anybody because their expectations of me are their own. I owe their expectations nothing, right? I only owe my choices, my own personal ethics, my own personal integrity. That's all I owe anything to, not the random demands of other people and their expectancies. This is a reality I'm talking about that I choose to live into. I'm a big fan of what I do call doing white path work, creating the trances you want to live into and you want to live from. That's the opposite of black path work, which is dismantling all trances, dissolving them away. So black path is solve, dissolving. White path is coagula, creating. This is time to talk about personal alchemy, which I guess is a pretty good time to stop this audio, because the next audio I'm going to do, and I'm not going to do it right away, is applying change work to myself. But I do thank the person who brought this in. It's really, really rich, really good. I hope that what I've offered here has been of value. It's not the same as doing a client work session. Some of those ideas, some of those concepts, if I was doing a client work session, I would weave them into conversational hypnosis flows, but they would be interactive and co-creative. So I would be able to see how they're landing and make adjustments. Obviously, when I'm doing an audio like this, I'm kind of just sort of downloading, and it's down to you to unconsciously or consciously, and I would suggest unconsciously, just allow this stuff to flow through, right? Allow the ideas to surprise you when they do, right? Find yourself understanding things at surprising times that you didn't understand before, and let that be a pleasant surprise for you. Or you can go back over this consciously, make notes, do whatever, whatever seems to work for you right now.
So there you go. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it inspiring. I loved the reminder that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You don't even actually have to feel confident to help someone. If you have thoughts, questions, ideas for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. You could reach us at changeworkingpod@gmail.com. See you next time.
Changeworking is produced by Ruckus Sky. For information on training, go to clientshifts.com.